Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, Rodger LeGrand. Rodger is a poet and a writer. Let me read a brief introduction to Rodger. I don't know why that's not going. Rodger has published 6 collections of poetry, including 2/3 Water, Seeds, and 1,000,000 Ravenous Creatures. His work has been described by the poet Thomas Lux as lighted by an almost excruciating tenderness towards the world and its inhabitants. The editor of the Cortland Review, Ginger Murchison, has described his work as poem of crisp intelligence sparked by imagination. He currently teaches at MIT. Welcome, David. The first question I was going to ask you, you had Seeds, this chapbook of poetry on the MBTA, I think through Mass Poetry. Was that it?
Yeah, that's
Tell
correct,
me a bit about the program and how that came to be.
So Books on the T is a program that takes the work of Boston area poets and writers and sends them out on the different train lines and they put a sticker on it. I can't recall what the message is. And the books then are dropped off and left for commuters to pick up and read and then deposit at different spots along the way. So it's a really cool program that brings poetry into the community in a way that normally it just wouldn't happen.
You're particularly fascinated with chapbooks of poetry, small books of poetry. Am I correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a great genre. It's a great form. It gives. I'm really drawn to the shorter genre. I mean, as a poet, I like short, concise, efficient things, and the chapbook is a way of getting an idea together, putting it into one space, and then kind of pulling back from it quickly. So it's a really nice genre, and I think it reflects, the nature of poetry nicely.
Now I've read in some interview that you said that poetry can be integrated into all subject matters. You're a teacher at MIT. You taught at UPenn, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah, and many other places. So maybe you can expand on that. It can be integrated into other things. How so? Do you do that? Yeah.
Well, if we think about how we enter poetry, we have different genres of poems, the sonnet, for instance, the villanelle. And the way we come to understand these genres is through reading and then through analyzing the genre and saying, how is a Shakespearean sonnet built? What are the structural elements that we need to have in place? And when can we break the rules of the genre? That sort of concept can be applied to teaching writing in businesses. Corporate education programs could use that to say, if we wanted, for instance, our staff to learn how to write annual reports or executive summaries or technical memos or something like this, we can use that same approach to reading poems to unlocking these other kinds of genres so that we can more effectively understand our audience and understand the moves we need to make in order to be successful. We do that in poetry from, like elementary school, I think, maybe middle school. But we don't do that in corporate America. We don't actually sit down and look at our writing in that way. Instead, people are expected to kind of come through college and then figure out what happens next. But with poetry, we do that really early, and I think that model could be applied to teaching corporations how to better communicate.
Poetry.
How
do you think corporations would be receptive to that?
I think so. If we start with saying, all right, you've read sonnets this way, and now we can open them up and understand how they're built, and now we understand what the sonnet is, and now you can write a sonnet too, right? That kind of idea. If we start there, which everyone will have had some experience with that, and then move into saying, all right, now you want your staff to be able to write in this genre, let's do the same thing here, and everyone will now understand how to effectively communicate in that genre. I don't know, I think if we can bridge that gap, of saying it's not like we're trying to force the arts on you. Not that I don't even know that anyone would mind in that sense. But if we could bridge that gap and focus on communication and understanding genre the way we do with poems, I think we could really expedite the communication's clarity and effectiveness in a number of different contexts.
Okay. Now, you come from Philly. I mean, you grew up in Oswego, New York, upstate New York.
Yeah, I'm originally from Syracuse. Just got to
Syracuse.
visit my family this summer, which was nice. Haven't been up there in a while. I'm originally from upstate New York, and I spent the last 10 years in Philadelphia.
Okay. And how does the scene differ, the poetry scene, literary scene, differ in Philadelphia than Boston?
It's a good question. The poetry scene in Philly is a sort of bifurcated. So on one hand, there's a vibrant slam scene. It's very active. And on the other, there's a lot of poetry happening in the universities. The Philadelphia Library hosts readings. But it's just different, you know, like the emphasis, like what's valued in poetry is just different.
How so?
Well, so we have those two factions. They don't usually
What two
cross.
factions are that again? I'm sorry.
So the slam poetry
We
scene
have that too, yeah.
outside of the university system, and then you have the university system, which is, they don't necessarily, in my experience, cross the slam and the...
Well, that's true here, yeah.
And then the emphasis in Philly in the university system, again, this could be argued, but from my experience, is it's sort of still like embracing like a language poetry model, which I do not see here.
What's language poetry in your opinion?
So language poetry is an emphasis on sound over meaning.
Okay.
You know, an emphasis on the word over the context. You know, so we would be more interested in the abstraction than in the connection with the with the audience. And
So it's not like something Neanderthals would be, you know, around the campfire. They wouldn't be doing. Well, maybe they would be.
well, maybe they would be doing it. Yeah,
language
yeah, yeah,
poetry.
yeah. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
it's a fine approach, but that is a difference here. You know, I just don't see the same sort of thing here.
Okay, all right. But I mean, Philadelphia has a strong literary tradition, just like it has here. And you live in Lowell, the home of Kerouac.
Absolutely,
Really,
yeah. Well, the literary tradition here, you know, you have Kerouac. Yeah. Bill Knott was at Emerson for, you know, a very long time. I mean, so many great poets have come out of this region, like Thomas Lux. You know, it's just a long list of great poets, and their focus has always been on poems being a made thing and an emphasis on craft, you know, craft awareness to convey a particular message so that the poems are communicated. Whereas my thinking of language poetry, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my thinking of language poetry is less about conveying the message and more about creating the art. And I think that's if I'm right about that, that's an important distinction.
Okay. Now, you just mentioned Thomas Lux. I know he was a big influence on you. You knew him, and he talked about you know, poetry doesn't have to be difficult, but it can be, but you know, it doesn't have to be difficult to be original. Or are you of the same philosophy?
Absolutely. You know, Tom is a brilliant. Anyone watching this not familiar with Tom Lux should go and read everything Tom wrote. He's a brilliant poet. A real intense focus on craft, and so much depth and meaning in all of his work. You know, it's just a tragic loss to the poetry world that that he's not with us any longer. And he's just a beautiful teacher, a brilliant teacher, and good at it. You know, like he was very, very a very inspirational teacher. And I think anyone who sees this who who knew Tom would immediately agree. I mean, he's just exceptional in every regard that way. Just the model teacher that you'd hope for, and the kind of poet you could just read and read and read. His focus on craft definitely influenced me, and his insistence. He comes from, in his earlier work, you'll see a lot of heavy surrealism, and then as he develops and matures as a poet, he focuses more. He always had an emphasis on craft, but he focuses more and more on craft to make the poems accessible and meaningful, and that really that works for me.
Now, do you believe in poetry as an agent for social change? I mean, Amari Baraka, that tradition of...
Yeah. I think that's great. I think that poems...
But you don't want it to become a political rant, that's the whole thing.
Right, well, I think most poems are political. I think that most poems, I write in my work, there's a lot of social justice poems, poems about foster care and homelessness. It's hard as poets take the world, filter it through their perceptions, and then try to make sense of it so that other people can relate to these things in new and unexpected ways. And I think that it's hard not to have politics become part of that. I agree. I don't necessarily want to hear a bunch of, I don't want to see someone get up on the stump every time they go to read poems. But I don't know that we can really remove politics entirely from our work.
Well, one time poetry was very powerful in the sense that they used to kill poets, the Armenian.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they killed thousands of them.
That's right.
They were dangerous, and the Soviets repressed them. They came out with what do you call the samizdat, Samizdat. The underground little booklets that when the Russians were suppressing their poets and things like that. Actually, they say poets under pressure do better. Under being being watched and repressed and going underground.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a more immediacy to their work or something like that. You don't write for academic audiences, you said.
I don't consider. I mean, I teach at universities, and I enjoy the work, and I love teaching, and I work hard to be good at it. I hope I'm good at it. But I don't consider myself an academic poet. For instance, we read this summer at a brewery, Aeronaut Brewery, hosted by Porter Square Books. It was awesome. It was a great time, wonderful location, and we, Porter Square Books, and that unity is bringing poems into a place that is not academia, and Books on the T is, the subway system, which is not academia.
Well, I think Ferlinghetti wanted people to have like paperback poetry books in their back pocket. The plumber,
That's right.
Have we reached that? I don't know.
I don't know that we've reached that.
Yeah.
But it'd be wonderful if we could.
Yeah.
And I think, this is a great time for it. It's a great time to be writing poems. There are more non-academic venues every day, with the rise of online publishing, online literary magazines. So there's a lot of value to the work that academic departments have done. A lot of the buying and selling of poetry happens in these departments, so there's, we should praise that. At the same time, I love the idea that we can have a plumber carrying a chapbook in his back pocket. There's something wonderful about that. And
of course, he'd want a wrench there too. It's just not
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But yeah. Now, I was reading one of your poems from Seeds, and it was in a Malthouse in Yonkers, and I liked how you portrayed. When you have that moment. Like it could even be yourself where you see a reflection. For a moment you think it's someone else, but then it's you, and you have this sort of like realization about yourself. And can you talk a bit about that Malthouse? Was that your wife?
Yeah, that's Ani. We went to graduate school together. I'm trying to find the
Sarah
poem.
Lawrence.
Sarah Lawrence, yeah. She studied in the child development program, and I was in the MFA program in poetry. And we lived, the Malthouse was at the bottom of our hill. I can't remember the street right now. In Yonkers. And we'd go down there after class and have a drink and hang out, and it was just a cool little corner bar.
How was Yonkers?
Yonkers was great. It's been a long time since I've been there. Yeah, it's a city. It's been a long time since I've been there, but while I was there, I loved it. I mean, look, I lived there for 2 years while being at Darrell Laurant's, hanging out with Thomas Lux and Stephen Dobyns, and
it's a working class town.
It's a working class town, and it was just a great place to be. Right outside New York City, and we could head down and check out poetry readings and meet a lot of people and talk with different writers, and great memories.
Yeah.
Great location.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so why don't you read that poem, by the way?
Sure. So it's from Seeds. The poem's called That Night at the Malthouse in Yonkers. First glance ignites slowly, sharply, how fire burns. Fuel. In a wildfire, fallen trees, dried leaves. For us, line of sight, eye contact, body and body. Miles plays over the banter of the after-work crowd. I see you at the bar, grabbing our pint glasses, and for a moment don't realize it's you I'm seeing. Burning by the molecule, oxygen combusting in a fury of sparks turning to flames. So taken by you that to see you across the bar this way is to see you for the first time. Heat. Convection through liquid, the clink of glasses. Waves of heat radiate, rotate out as the vibrations from the sunset spiraling past Venus's densely packed atmosphere. Conduction, heat transfer between two objects, two bodies in direct physical contact. You come back to our table, smiling at me, smiling at you.
Nice, nice. Well, I mean, I want to open it up to you reading from your works, and you're all chapbooks. You don't have like a perfect bound edition yet.
No, I have Millions of Ravenous Creatures, Big Table Publishing with Robin Stratton.
You know Robin?
Yep.
Is that how I met you, through Robin?
Yeah. So when I
she's now in San Francisco now.
She's officially there.
Yeah.
That's great. She was really excited about that. Robin has published 2 of my collections, one chapbook and this, Millions of Ravenous Creatures. And we've known each other now since 2009 and never once met. So when I moved up here, I thought, I get to meet Robin. We can, do some readings, grab dinner, and then she moved to San Francisco.
Change.
But change is good. Before she left, I didn't know she had left yet, but I had written to her saying about reading at Aeronaut Brewery in June, and she said, you have to write to Doug. He's the heart and soul of the poetry scene in Boston.
She's
so
very nice
reach
woman.
out. And so that's how I met you.
Right.
So yeah, I wrote to you that way.
Yeah.
So that's
well, actually, we had contact many years ago.
That's right. Yes, actually we did.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm blanking on it right now. But we had an email exchange. Like, I don't know, it might have been back in like 2003.
Yeah.
I have to go back to my archives.
Yeah. Strange. It's a small world.
It is.
Yeah. Well, go, lay it on us.
Did you want me to read from this? Since you
whatever you
mentioned it?
want. It's up to you. It's your thing.
How much time do I have to read?
I would say you have about 12 minutes.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll read a couple of poems here then. I'll read one. I read. I'm not going to read this one. I read an ode it's kind of gross, so I'll leave that one out.
It's all right. We've had gross here.
All right. Well, let's do the ode then. This is an ode, and
define an ode for the
odes,
layman here.
I think of odes as poems of praise and poems that show regard and acknowledge And it's in the word. As poets, we're always thinking about language and the way language sounds. And the word ode has that O in the beginning, and you can hear the O, the reverence. And the title of this poem is called "Ode to a Shameless Nose Picker."
Yeah.
Oh, nose picker, 2 fingers each, knuckle deep, probing inward and upward. Your determination, remnant of America's lost frontier ethos. Unfazed by other subway riders' stares and groans, undeterred by the train's brutal vibrations that turn the poker fingers into up-ended jackhammers, relentlessly slamming forward like Whitman's long, parallactic lines, rhythmic realizations that still spill through Camden's side streets and into the Delaware. Sweet nose picker, sweet adventurer. You represent hope of a freer future, an America of equal daughters, equal sons, all alike, endeared, grown, ungrown, young or old, strong, ample, fair, enduring, capable, rich, perennial with the earth, with freedom, law, and love, a grand, sane, towering seated mother, chaired in the adamant of time, where anything is possible, an America of unclogged air holes, an America of united body and mind. Lead us through this next century, dear explorer, given what we've become, given our depression. Lead us this way, out of our holy mess, for all the world to see.
Okay.
So that's a political poem.
Yeah, you are a bit of an outlaw if you pick your nose in some ways.
Yeah.
In a certain company. Not if you're home alone.
No, that would be fine, I suppose. Doug apparently picks his nose, so. All right, I'll change that. I'll put a little dedicated to Doug next time. I'll read a couple more poems. This is from Seeds. Tongue, a weird word to spell. The mouth muscle, to lick, taste, speak. Today I tongue the empty spaces where my teeth used to be, a graveyard with missing tombstones. Near death from a cracked tooth, blood tooth, infected tooth. In recovery, the feeling of your laugh bounces through my chest, and I want it to stay there, to line the inside of my body. I'll ask Eric Gunter if he can tattoo your laugh onto my left ventricle. Probably have time for a couple more
plan,
poems.
I hope, at MIT.
Yes, my dentist is wonderful, and I'm in great shape now. So,
good.
Though it comes up again. I mean, this whole this tooth thing was a big deal in my life, and
what?
My dental issue became a. I had a
well, it's interesting.
Tooth,
Patti Smith once said that. If you have any advice for artists, she says, take care of your teeth, because if you don't, the pain could just drive you mad, and it's
not safe. Mine were cracked. All right, anyway, here we go. I Don't Want to Be a Fat Corpse. That's a poem. The title came from a friend of mine, Doug Hellinger. Said, you should write a poem called I Don't Want to Be a Fat Corpse, so I did. I don't want to be a fat corpse. A rectangle of earth pulled from the ground like a tooth. Grass scent of summer makes its turn toward cooler months, leaves quilting a blanket for the ego to fall upon. Who will remember you? Great-grandparents' wedding photo hanging on the wall. Early 1900s, all these years, and now with no children. I'll be the last to see this photo. There's no one next in line to search for meaning in it, to look for a hint of resemblance. Handmade wedding dress, bouquet of hand-picked flowers. Everything was by hand back then. Black and white, matte print, no smiles, still expressionless. I don't want to be a fat corpse, which I can clearly imagine given the circumference of my waistline. Energy never ends. it transforms. Me and my excess padding converted into fuel, me into mucus and rotting flesh, me into an oblivion of shallow breathing, of chocolate pudding memories. The couple in the photo, though, pinned beneath a glass frame, younger than I am now and lean, on the verge of starvation, but somehow they survived until this broken branch of their family tree. The finality of me. Here I am, heavier than both of them combined. Their success, their survival embodied in my waistline, and in me also they'll find their demise. No children. I am where the family lineage ends. My only grace, imagining transformation. I'll be a metamorphosis, a moonlit moth flinging itself back into its cocoon, an accumulation of rationalities, of should-haves, of laziness, the terror of confronting the nothingness that sits soundless on a blank page. Fat corpse, stone cut into a slanted half oval with a few words chiseled beneath my birth and death dates. Who will tend your weeds? Who will burn incense in your memory? Who will set flowers at your head? No, only the worms will visit. I only have faith in you, Mr. Worm, Simic wrote. They'll come for a while, until even they have no reason to stay. I read a letter from the man in the photo to his bride. The sun setting over your shoulder in the mirror. I can remember every time I saw your face from this particular angle. If I could leave anything to you to hold on to and remember of me, it would be how I feel when I see you this way.
That's great. I think you might have time for a very short poem. Anything you might want to read?
All right, let's do one more. It's called Darkness.
Short one, though, actually, because I think you got 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This last poem is called Message in a Bottle. To fill every page, millions of loose leaves, all the same, scribbled over and over like tide rolling in or out. The moon's influence driving the oceans mad with indecision. How could you? On each note in longhand, stuffed into cork glass bottles and tossed into the sea of tranquility. Millions of bottles, millions of words, all the same, stinging silent in the moon's empty atmosphere. In an empty sea, no life, no chance of a response. Millions of notes screaming to be read,